Hey everyone, you know many of the Earth's weirdest things have been found deep underground? So for today's video, I'm counting down the top 15 strangest things found deep in the Earth. Number 15. A Mithraeum. So discovered underground in 1931 during a building project near Rome's Circus Maximus, the Mithraeum is a temple dedicated to the cult of the god Mithras. Mithraism was a religion separate from Rome's state pagan religion, and in its early years it competed with Christianity for followers, before eventually fizzling out. The Mithraeum, buried here, serves as a place of prayer, sacrifice, and ritual meals of bread and wine for between 30 to 40 cult followers at a time. Today, it's fully open to the public and can be seen on an appointment-only basis. Number 14. Abandoned French cars. So in 2016, a Belgian PE teacher decided to explore an abandoned quarry in central France. What he discovered deep within a shaft was a cache of 1930s-era French cars. This kid was found on a loading truck. Once the miners noticed it, they quickly closed off the area. This allowed paleontologists to excavate the old stream bed where the fossils were buried. In time, they unearthed more than 20 bones from the mammoth skeleton, including ribs, a shoulder blade, a tooth, and parts of the hips. Given the fact that most mammoth fossils in the state only consist of single bones and teeth, this was an incredible discovery. Number 12. A World War II bomb. While World War II may have ended nearly 80 years ago, its legacy hasn't entirely disappeared. That's because from time to time, relics from the war years will unexpectedly make an appearance. You see, in 2016, residents of the German city of Augsburg had to evacuate their homes after an undetonated World War II-era bomb was found underneath a construction site. In total, 54,000 people were forced to relocate until the German police could defuse the bomb. Unfortunately for these residents, though, this happened on Christmas Day. One was found by the Germans either way, and one was recovered at the end of the war, and one was believed to have been lost to history. However, in 2021, further research led to the 150-kilogram bronze bell being found and dug up, and it has since been restored to its former glory. Number 10. San Fran ships. Well, San Francisco is a city that has quite a bit of history. Be it the Golden Gate Bridge or Alcatraz Island, there are lots of sites that tourists come to see. So many, in fact, that the city welcomes a whopping 21 million visitors a year. Yet deep beneath the streets of the city lies something you may not expect, a cache of old-timey boats. The reason for this can be traced back to the city's history. You see, in 1848, the gold rush began in California. Deposits were located close to the town of San Francisco, and soon it ballooned from a settlement of 200 people in 1846 to a city of 36,000 in 1852. In order to get to this new boom city, thousands came in. After further study, it was determined to be a lighter, which was a type of ship that would shuttle supplies between the harbor and larger boats out in the ocean. Another interesting example is the Candace. Excavated during the creation of the city's famous Infinity Towers, this 30-meter-long vessel had quite the history. After all, it did everything from whaling in the Indian Ocean to traversing the Arctic. It was eventually brought to San Francisco, where it was partially recycled, with parts of it being put onto other ships that needed repair. Yet the reality is that no matter what their origin story, what is clear is that San Fran's buried ships are pretty cool. Number 9. The Kola Super Deep Borehole. The late 1960s and early 1970s marked some of the most incredible scientific achievements. Be it the United States landing a man on the moon in 1969, or the creation of the first lunar rover and space station by the Soviets in 1970 and 71, there was a spirit of Cold War competition in the air. However, while space is the frontier that's most talked about, now, of course, the million-dollar question is, did they find anything? Well, the answer is, quite simply, yeah. At a depth of about 7 kilometers, scientists found fossils of strange single-celled microscopic plankton. And at around that depth, they also found a bunch of water. This water was boiling with an unexpectedly high amount of hydrogen gas, getting so hot that it reached the temperature of 180 degrees Celsius. They also had some of their assumptions proven wrong. For example, while the scientists expected to find layers of basalt, none were ever found, challenging the assumption that these layers did indeed exist. Now, despite getting so deep, the scientists didn't get anywhere close to the Earth's core. In order to pull that off, they would have had to drill for about 6,400 kilometers. To put this into perspective, the borehole just got 0.2% to the way there. As such, while it may have been deep, I'm sure that even more strange discoveries would have been made if they had been able to keep going. Despite this, the Russians have a lot to be proud of. After all, their creation is still the world's largest human-made borehole. They vary widely in shape. After all, they range from being flattened spheres to well-defined disks, and often are intergrown with other nearby disks. On one hand, these spheres, while odd, have a scientific explanation. Most geologists agree that they formed in volcanic sediments about 3 billion years ago. While they do have those weird grooves, geologists have suggested that they're natural in origin. Furthermore, similar spheres have been found all the way in Australia that are between 2.7 to 2.8 billion years old. And as such, it seems like this process is not only natural, but not also limited to the South African mine. However, these findings haven't stopped the internet conspiracy theorists from suggesting another origin story. They contend that the spheres were not put there naturally, instead they were inserted into the rock by aliens. More specifically, articles from the early 1980s speculate that the spheres were made by, quote, a higher civilization, a pre-flood civilization about which we know virtually nothing, end quote. And it may even be the remains of an old spaceship, scientific evidence. The reality is that the idea that aliens put the spheres there is non-verifiable. After all, there's no way for us to verify or be sure that aliens did not do the deed. Yet, given the strong natural explanation, I say that the chances that aliens had anything to do with 3 billion-year-old rock deposits are virtually zero. Moving on to number 7, walrus bones. London has a pretty extensive set of rail and metro lines, and of all the city's hubs, St. Pancras often considered to be the most incredible. Providing access to everything from local trains to international routes out to Belgium, France, and the Netherlands, the station is absolutely massive and incredibly impressive. It's partially because of its grand and historic status that the decision was made to upgrade it in 2003. As part of the excavations, the decision was made to dig up an old cemetery. While human remains were expected and certainly found, workers were at a loss when they discovered an oddity. Team 53 and is currently the prime suspect. This is because the specimen was believed to have been dissected by anatomists. By chance, the St. Pancras Old Cemetery was located very close to the zoological gardens, and this perhaps led to the most believable story, which is that the walrus was dissected and simply buried there due to the convenient location. However, that's not the only theory out there. A second one suggests that the second walrus may be the culprit. Admitted in 1867, this specimen was caught in the Labrador Sea and was well loved by the citizens. However, its whereabouts, once it passed away, are not clear, and it's believed that it may have been part of a dissecting incident. During this time period, there was a surplus of doctors and a shortage of corpses to dissect. This meant that there was common for gravediggers to dig up cemeteries for remains, selling them on the black market to budding surgeons. Since the walrus bones were not found alone, but in a casket with the remains of 8 other people, it's been theorized that the walrus may have been dissected, and then the group dumped it into the cemetery for convenience. While Pompeii was known to be a playhouse filled with everything from live entertainment to brothels, making it a place where people could go to vacation and to go wild. And while it offered good times year-round, I wouldn't have wanted to been there in October of 79 AD. That's because over the course of 2 days, Mount Vesuvius erupted, ejecting molten rock, pulverized pumice, and hot ash at a rate of 1.5 million tons per second, ultimately releasing 100,000 times the thermal energy of the atomic bomb. As you might imagine, this was bad news for Pompeii and the neighboring city of Herculaneum, as both were obliterated and buried underneath massive pyroclastic surges and asphalt deposits. Now, while this was tragic in a human sense, after all, a total of about 20,000 people died, what it ended up being was a massive boon for archaeologists 1,000 years later. That's because the city being completely covered in ash proved to be a great thing for preservation. In 1748, excavations under the reign of Charles of Bourbon found even more structures. Excavations, baths, forum, and brothels are worth prioritizing. It's also worth noting that a trip here is not for the faint of heart. After all, many of the victims have been preserved by the ash, and their silhouettes can be seen on display at various areas of the city. Yet, so long as you look at these bodies with a bit of morbid curiosity, a trip to Pompeii is well worth it. Number 5. A Ferrari. When digging around in your backyard, you'd probably expect to find soil, some earthworms, and maybe the occasional rock. But in 1978, a Los Angeles resident received the shock of a lifetime when he unearthed a 1965 Ferrari Dino Berlinetta Speciale. The origins of this vehicle reside in a good old-fashioned insurance scam. The story goes that on the evening of December 7, 1974, the original owner of the vehicle, Rosendo Cruz, reported that their Ferrari had been stolen. He told the police that he believed it was the valet, who according to him had a suspicious gleam in his eye. The story more or less died there. Buried the Ferrari as part of an insurance scam. More specifically, he conspired to commit insurance fraud with the thieves. The idea was that they'd steal the car and bury it. Then, Rosendo would submit the insurance claim, split the money, and then have it removed from the backyard so the whole thing could be sold for parts. However, for some reason or another, the thieves forgot where they buried the thing, and this in turn led to it being abandoned, only to be found 4 years later. But what's interesting about this car is that despite its time underground, it was actually sold to the public. You see, in order to compensate for the $22,500 loss suffered by the insurance company, said company was given the right to sell it. Given the flood of media coverage, the company decided to capitalize on the publicity by creating a special auction with sealed bids. Unfortunately for them, that proved to be a disaster. While it was on display, the thieves stripped the car of most everything not bolted down. In fact, they went so far that they even took the oil dipstick. Worse still, many of the bids were illegitimate, forcing the company to recall the bidders. Has been given offers for it that were likely north of $1 million. He's confirmed that it is both not and will not be for sale. Number 4. A rainforest. While caves are known for having creatures such as bats, spiders, and even axolotls, it's rare that any sort of greenery grows down there. Yet the cave named Son Doong is a strange but very notable exception to this rule. Located in central Vietnam, for millennia it was a complete mystery to the outside world. In 1991, that all changed when a local man stumbled across it while searching for wood. He was initially wanting to venture inside, but he was discouraged after hearing the sound of rushing water and strong wind at the entrance. Not thinking much of it, he returned home and, over time, forgot about the exact location. This could have been the end of the story. But by chance, in 2008, 2 members of the British Cave Research Association were in the area and just so happened to talk to the man. With his help, they were able to rediscover the entrance and skylights that allowed sunlight to get into the cave. This sunlight has allowed trees and plants to take root, creating an incredible jungle below. Thanks to millions of years of secluded evolution, it's got its own endemic plants, monkeys, flying foxes, frogs, insects, and hares that are found nowhere else in the world. Yet the real showstopper is the cave's geology. That's because it's home to a row of 70 to 90 meter stalagmites. That makes them some of the largest on the planet, and the ones at Son Doong are so immense that they've been nicknamed the Great Wall of Vietnam. But if you'd like a tour, the tickets start at about $3,000. The prices are steep, however for that price you get to go on a guided 5-night and 6-day journey through the cave with many necessities such as camping gear, boots, and food being included. And while the travel company does have a monopoly that may seem unfair, in many ways, having just one company administering tourism in the cave helps with conservation, and it ensures that a high-quality standard is met. In any case, the reviews for the tour are overwhelmingly positive. An incredible settlement with a lot of history. Not all of the specifics are well known. Ventilated by a total of more than 15,000 shafts, most are about 10 centimeters wide and reach down into the first and second levels of the city, allowing for good airflow all the way down to the 8th level. The creation of such a wonderful city was possible thanks to the area's unique geography. You see, the rocky areas of the region consist of tuff, which is a substance that's made primarily out of volcanic ash. Now, fortunately, this tuff is very easy to dig due to the fact that, rather ironically, it's not very tough. It's this softness that allowed such an extensive tunnel system to be dug out. And while this does have some downsides, after all, the softness of the stone does make cave-ins a big risk. Thankfully, Darren Kuyu's large support pillars have prevented the floors from experiencing any collapse. Now, the actual date of the foundation of the city is still up for debate. Some scholars argue that the oldest part of the complex could have been dug out around 2000 BCE by the Hittites. Others instead attribute the created a system. During times of peace, they remained above ground in so-called fairy chimneys, carving homes for themselves out of caves. However, during times of war, it's believed that around 20,000 people would shelter underground in Darren Kuyu. The floor below held living quarters, with these including bedrooms, kitchens, and even a winery. Even further below ground was everything needed to run a city, including food supply, warehouses, water wells, and burial chambers. Darren Kuyu saw use all the way up until the 20th century. However, when the Greeks who hid in them were expelled from the country in 1923, the subterranean city was closed up and forgotten. Thankfully, its 1963 rediscovery has once again put them at the forefront of Turkish archaeological research. Today, it is part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Cappadocia, and now receives tons of tourists. Number 2. An underground cinema. While the Paris catacombs are known for being pretty dark, cold, and creepy, what they aren't known for is being an entertainment venue. In September of 2004, police